I never thought the sound of a single word could break me. But the way Layla said sir that night, soft, polite, distant, it tore through me like silence after a storm. She didn't know, not then. She didn't know that the man she called sir, with her elegant smile and cautious tone, was my father, the same man who had raised me with worn hands and quiet wisdom. The same man she thought was our driver. I remember the way she turned to him that evening, standing by the marble staircase in her family's mansion. She held her teacup delicately, her golden earrings swaying with every word. My father stood beside me in his old jacket, the one with faded seams and a stubborn patch near the elbow. He looked small in that bright room, like time itself had dimmed him. "Thank you, sir," she said, as he poured her another cup. And my father, my proud, humble father, simply nodded, his lips curling into a soft, unreadable smile. That moment burned into me. I wanted to speak, to tell her, to tell everyone, this man you call sir is more than you think. But I didn't. I watched, because my father's eyes told me not to. Later that night, when I helped him into our small car parked outside her mansion, he said quietly, "She's polite. That's rare these days." And then he smiled, not bitterly, not sadly, but the way he always did when he wanted to protect me from the world's unkindness. Back then, I thought it was just another evening, but that word sir became the thread that unraveled everything. Love, pride, truth, and the secret that would turn our lives upside down. Sometimes, I wish I had stopped her right then, told her the truth. Other times, I think fate needed her to learn it herself, because when she finally did, when Layla found out who Mr. Jordan really was, her eyes filled with the kind of tears money can't buy, and apologies the heart can barely speak. When people see me now, they think I've always been calm, the kind of man who doesn't raise his voice, who listens more than he speaks. But truth is, I learned silence from my father. Mr. Jordan wasn't an ordinary man. Even in his simplest clothes, he carried a kind of quiet dignity, like he had seen the world and chosen peace over pride. He never told anyone about his past or what he used to be. To me, he was just Dad, the man who worked odd jobs, fixed neighbors' fences, and gave away his last dollar to a stranger who needed it more. We lived in a small house on the outskirts of Toronto, the kind of place where winters came early and stayed too long. Our walls creaked with cold, and our furniture never matched, but my father's laughter made everything feel warm. He believed in small joys, the smell of coffee at dawn, the first snow on the porch, the sound of me reading aloud from an old book. Layla came from a different world. She was the daughter of a real estate tycoon, a man whose name appeared on billboards who never repeated his suits. Layla was beautiful, yes, but what caught my heart wasn't her looks. It was the way she listened when no one else did. We met at a university event. She was studying business. I was there helping set up sound equipment. She asked me if I was part of the student council, and I laughed, telling her I wasn't even a student there, just earning extra cash after work. But she didn't look away like most people did. She smiled. That was the beginning. Our worlds collided, like two different seasons trying to meet in the middle. She liked fine coffee and rooftop dinners. I liked simple meals and quiet sunsets. Yet somehow, we found a rhythm, a way to belong in each other's space. My father met her a few weeks later. I still remember how nervous I was, asking him to come along when I invited her for dinner at our place. Our house was too small, our table too old, and I worried what she'd think. But when Layla walked in, she smiled politely, her eyes scanning the humble room, and then she said, "It's cozy," she meant well. I could tell. Dad made tea that night, his special blend with a touch of cinnamon and patience. He spoke little, but his kindness filled the silence. Layla noticed that. She even told me later, "Your father has this peaceful energy. It's rare." Back then, I didn't realize how deep those words would go. Her parents didn't approve of me, of course. They smiled at me when she introduced us, but I could see it in their eyes, the quiet judgment that comes from old money and inherited pride. Her mother once asked me, "What do you do, Jackson?" in that polite but sharp tone people use when they already know the answer. I told her honestly, "I'm working in maintenance for a property company." She nodded, then turned to Layla and said, "You've always liked projects, dear." I smiled through it, but inside it hurt. Layla defended me, though. She told them I was different, that I had values, and maybe that's why I loved her more than I should have. We spent months planning a simple engagement, Something small, nothing grand. Layla agreed, or at least she said she did. But as the day approached, I saw her struggling with the idea of simplicity. She'd look at bridal magazines and sigh quietly, as if fighting herself between love and appearance. Dad noticed it too. One evening when I was polishing my old shoes for the event, he said, "Don't let the shine of things dim the truth, son. Real love doesn't need gold to glow." I didn't fully understand then, but his words stayed with me. A few days later, Layla's parents invited us to dinner at their mansion, a grand home near the lakeside. All glass and chandeliers, it was supposed to be a simple evening, a chance for both families to meet properly. That's where it all began, the night she called my father sir. He insisted on driving us there, saying, "You shouldn't show up in a cab on your engagement dinner." I didn't know why he smiled like that when he said it, or why he chose his oldest jacket. When we arrived, the house was glowing. People in designer suits moved about like scenes from another world. My father opened the car door for Layla, and she thanked him politely, the way she would thank a stranger doing his job. And from that moment, the tone of the evening shifted. Layla's family's mansion shimmered like another world that evening. Chandeliers threw soft gold on marble floors, and the quiet hum of expensive laughter filled the air. I tried not to feel small. I told myself it was just a dinner. But the moment we stepped inside, I knew it was a test. Layla's father greeted us first, smiling in that measured way rich men do. "Jackson," he said, shaking my hand lightly. "Good to finally meet the young man my daughter speaks so highly of." Then his eyes drifted to my father. "And this is—" Before I could answer, my father bowed his head politely. "Just the driver, sir, helping my son for the evening." I froze. I wanted to correct him, to say, "No, this is my father," but he gave me a small glance, the kind that carried 100 unspoken reasons. So I stayed quiet. Layla, too, accepted the moment. She smiled a little stiffly and said, "Thank you, sir," when he handed her coat to the attendant. It was a small moment, but it struck me deeper than I expected. Dinner began with gentle music and glittering plates. Her parents asked questions that sounded kind but weren't. "So, Jackson," her father said, slicing into his steak, "do you plan to continue? In maintenance?" I nodded, swallowing the sting. "For now, yes. I'm working toward a promotion." He smiled faintly, as if I had said something naive. "Ambition is good. But you must understand, Layla's lifestyle requires certain stability." Layla shifted uncomfortably. "Dad, please," he raised a hand. "I'm only asking." Then, turning to my father, he added with a half smile, "And you, sir, how long have you been driving?" My father looked at him calmly, long enough to see people reach where they're meant to go. The table went silent for a second. I caught a glimpse of something in my father's eyes. Not offense, not shame, but quiet amusement, like he saw through the entire show. After dinner, when Layla's parents walked us to the door, her mother leaned close to her and whispered something I wasn't supposed to hear. "He seems kind, but kindness doesn't pay the bills." We drove home in silence. My father hummed softly under his breath, the same tune he always did when he didn't want me to feel embarrassed. When we reached our house, I finally said, "Why did you let them think you're my driver?" He smiled faintly, "Because sometimes, son, people show who they really are when they think you're beneath them. And I needed to see how she looks at you when she thinks you come from nothing." His words sank deep. Days turned into weeks, and the gap between Layla and me quietly widened. She was still gentle, still affectionate, but something in her had changed. A slight hesitation when we spoke about the future, a pause when money came up. I worked extra shifts to save for our wedding. She started planning venues that I couldn't afford, even in dreams. One evening, while scrolling through a list of decorators, she said softly, "Jackson, maybe my parents can help with the expenses. It's normal." I looked up. "I don't want their help, Layla. I'll manage." She sighed. "You're proud." "And you're forgetting who we are," I said quietly. She looked hurt, but before she could answer, my phone buzzed. "Dad? Son, can you come home early tonight?" he asked. "Got something I'd like to show you." When I arrived, he was in the backyard, fixing an old bicycle. "This belonged to your mother," he said, wiping the dust off the frame. "I thought you might like to restore it for her memory." I smiled faintly. "You always think of the small things, Dad," he chuckled. "Small things build big hearts, Jackson. Remember that?" I didn't know that night was one of his quiet tests, not just for me, but for Layla too. A week later, Layla invited me to a charity gala her father was hosting. "It'll be good for us," she said, "to be seen together." When we entered the ballroom, she looked stunning. Silver gown, calm confidence. People turned when she walked in. I, on the other hand, felt like a shadow behind her light. Her father introduced her proudly to a group of investors. "This is my daughter, Layla, and her fiancé, Jackson." Then one of them asked casually, "What field are you in, Jackson?" Before I could answer, her father replied, "For me." He's still exploring options. Laughter followed, polite, shallow laughter that echoed like a slap. Layla didn't defend me. She smiled weakly and looked away. I left the ballroom early, stepping outside into the cold night. My breath turned to fog in the air, and so did my patience. I was halfway to the parking lot when I saw my father there, waiting by the car, hands folded behind his back. He had come to pick us up. "Leaving early?" he asked softly. "Couldn't breathe in there," I muttered. He looked toward the lit windows of the gala and said, "It's all noise, son. Don't lose your worth trying to sound like them." I nodded, though my heart ached. When Layla joined us later, she barely spoke. She sat in the back seat scrolling her phone. My father drove silently through the glowing streets of downtown Toronto. The city lights reflected in her eyes, but they didn't reach me. At one red light, she looked up from her screen and said, "Thank you, sir," as my father adjusted the rear mirror. "And again, sir." My father's lips curved into that same gentle smile. "You're welcome, ma'am." I stared at her reflection in the glass. The woman I loved. The woman who couldn't see that the man driving her home had built empires. Quietly, while she learned to measure worth by appearances, the following morning, my father handed me an envelope. Inside were 2 wedding invitations. "Send these to her family," he said. "And one more thing, don't worry about the costs." "Dad, I can't." He stopped me with a raised hand. "Just trust me." I didn't understand where the money came from. He'd always lived simply, saving every coin. But the invitations were printed on the finest paper, the kind only luxury printers used. When I asked him how he afforded it, he just smiled. Sometimes, old friends remember their debts. It didn't make sense, not then, but a small part of me began to wonder who my father really was. As the wedding drew closer, the tension deepened. Layla grew restless. Her parents pushed for a larger venue. My father stayed calm through it all, helping quietly behind the scenes. He never complained, never judged. One night, I came home to find him reading an old newspaper article. I caught a glimpse of the headline before he folded it away. "Jordan Holdings founder mysteriously steps down. Fortune unaccounted for." "You?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Just an old story, son. Some things are better left sleeping." Before I could press further, he changed the subject. A few days before the wedding, Layla visited our house again. She looked out of place among our worn furniture, her diamond earrings glinting against the dim light. "Jackson," she said softly, "can we move in with my parents after the wedding? Just until we find something better." I looked at her, speechless. She hesitated. "It's just, your place is too far, and Dad says it'll help us save." Before I could reply, my father stepped in from the kitchen, holding 2 cups of tea. "You'll find your own place soon enough," he said warmly. "Newlyweds need their own sky." Layla forced a smile. "Thank you, sir. You're very kind." He nodded, setting the tea down. "Kindness is free, ma'am. The rarest things usually are—" She didn't know what he meant. I think neither did I, not fully. But those words stayed with me, because soon the day would come when she'd stand before him, trembling, realizing that the sir she spoke to with polite distance was the man whose name she'd seen carved on the tallest building in the city. And that revelation would change everything. The morning of our wedding dawned soft and cold, the kind of winter light that looked almost silver against the rooftops of Toronto. Snowflakes drifted slowly outside my window, and everything felt strangely quiet. My father was already up when I came downstairs. He was dressed simply, as always, a charcoal suit. White shirt, no tie. His hands trembled a little as he adjusted the cuffs. "Big day, huh?" I said. He smiled. "Every day you find love is a big day." There was a calmness in his voice that didn't match the nerves twisting inside me. It was as though he knew something I didn't, something beyond the ceremony, beyond all this noise about money and pride. "Dad," I said softly, "there's something I don't understand. All these wedding bills, the venue, the catering, I know what they cost. You've been paying for things, haven't you?" How he looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "Some truths are better shown than told." And that was all. The ceremony was beautiful. Even I couldn't deny that. Layla looked breathtaking in white, her smile glowing beneath the veil. Her family's guests filled the hall, people in shimmering gowns and dark suits. The kind who spoke softly but watched everything. My father sat in the front row, quiet as always. He didn't speak much to anyone, but people greeted him with polite nods, assuming he was just the groom's elderly relative. As the vows began, I caught his eyes. He looked at me with that same calm strength that had guided me all my life, and somehow my heart steadied. When it was over, and the applause echoed, I saw him leave the hall briefly, walking toward the courtyard with his phone in hand. The reception was grander than I expected. Waiters moved like clockwork. Chandeliers reflected endless light, and soft jazz filled the air. Layla was radiant, surrounded by friends and family congratulating her. But something in her father's demeanor caught my attention. He seemed unusually polite, toward my dad now to polite. At one point, I saw them speaking privately near the exit. Layla's father's posture had changed completely, respectful, almost nervous. My father just nodded, listening, that same serene expression on his face. When I walked over, her father stepped aside, looking pale. "Jackson," he said slowly, "you didn't tell me?" "Tell you what?" I asked. He swallowed. "Who your father is." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Before he could answer, my father placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "It's time, son," he said quietly. He led us both outside. The snow had started again, soft flakes catching the glow of the lamps. A sleek black car waited at the gate, the kind of vehicle I'd only seen in magazines. A man in a dark coat stepped out and handed my father a tablet. "Sir," he said respectfully, "the board is ready whenever you are." Layla's father stiffened. "The board," he repeated. My father nodded. "Yes. Jordan Holdings' annual meeting. I delayed it to be here today." The name hit like thunder. Layla's father's lips parted, and Layla herself went pale. "Jordan Holdings," she whispered, as in, "the Jordan Holdings." My father looked at her with a gentle smile. "That's right, ma'am." Then, after a pause, his tone softened. "Though I prefer Mr. Jordan. I believe you've called me that before." Her breath caught. Her hands trembled as she looked between us. "You mean, you're that Mr. Jordan?" He nodded once. "Retired, mostly. I prefer to live quietly now." Layla covered her mouth with her hand. Her father looked like the ground had been pulled from under him. I stood there in stunned silence. I had known my father lived humbly, but the name Jordan Holdings was everywhere. Skyscrapers, tech companies, shipping firms. He was a legend in Canadian business circles, a man who had disappeared decades ago, selling his shares quietly and vanishing into simplicity. He had walked away from billions, to live like an ordinary man. "Why didn't you tell me?" I finally whispered. He looked at me with a faint smile. "Because, Jackson, I needed you to build your own worth, not live under mine." Layla was crying now, quietly, the kind of tears that came from realization, not pain. "Sir, I mean, Mr. Jordan, I didn't know." He raised a hand gently. "You don't have to explain, Layla. You treated me with respect, even when you thought I was just a driver. That says something good about you. But perhaps it also says something about the world you come from, where kindness is often mistaken for class." She shook her head, wiping her tears. "I feel ashamed. I judged without meaning to." He smiled kindly. "We all do, child. Life has a way of showing us mirrors we didn't ask for." The car door opened again. One of the assistants stepped closer. "Sir, the media already heard about your attendance. Should we confirm your statement?" Layla's father stared in disbelief. "Media? Wait, this wedding, they'll think?" My father chuckled softly. "That the founder of Jordan Holdings attended his son's wedding. Let them think I'm proud of my son, proud of the woman he chose." Layla looked at me then. Truly looked. All the walls in her eyes crumbled, and what was left was raw, quiet love. "Jackson," she whispered, "I'm so sorry." I was blind. I took her hands. Maybe we both were. But now you see who he really is, not because of money, but because of how he chose to live. My father turned to her parents. "I don't care about wealth or reputation. I care about how people treat those they think are small, because that, more than money, shows who they truly are." Her father lowered his head. "Mr. Jordan, I owe you an apology. I had no idea. Then let's start from here, my father said simply. No apologies, just truth. Inside the hall, the murmurs spread fast. People had learned who the old man was. Cameras flashed at the doorway, reporters whispered, and suddenly every guest wanted to shake his hand. But he ignored the crowd and came straight to me. You'll have many people trying to claim you now, he said quietly, but don't let that noise take away your peace. You earned your own respect long before they found out who I was. I nodded, my throat tight. He looked at Layla. And you, my dear, remember this. Love tested by truth either breaks or becomes unbreakable. You'll know soon enough which one yours is. Layla wiped her tears and whispered, "It won't break, sir." Then she smiled through the tears. "Sorry, Mr. Jordan." He laughed softly. "No, child. I'll always be sir to you. It suits you better." That night, after the guests were gone and the snow had thickened outside, Layla and I sat in silence by the window of our hotel room. She was still processing everything. The shift from seeing my father as a quiet driver to realizing he was one of the most respected businessmen in the country. "I feel so foolish," she said. "All the times I worried about what people thought, and your father was sitting right there, watching us play our little games." I reached for her hand. "He never judged you, Layla. He just wanted to see your heart." She leaned on my shoulder, whispering, "I think he saw it before I did." The next morning we visited him. He was already outside, feeding birds on the porch, wearing the same simple jacket he always did. When Layla approached, she knelt beside him. "Mr. Jordan, I can never thank you enough for forgiving me." He smiled, eyes soft. "Forgiveness is just another word for understanding, my dear, and I understand you perfectly." Then he looked at both of us. "Now you know why I live like this." I walked away from noise because I wanted my son to grow in silence, to learn that love, respect, and humility are the only real wealth. Layla nodded slowly, tears rolling again. "I see that now." He chuckled quietly. "Then you've already inherited everything that matters." That day, the truth settled into peace. Layla stopped hiding behind appearances. Her parents softened. And my father, well, he went back to his quiet life, as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. I understood now that the greatest power isn't in money, but in the ability to hide it gracefully. And I had the privilege of calling that power dad. The days after the wedding felt different. The house was quiet, but not empty. It carried the warmth of something newly understood. Layla and I spent our first mornings together sitting on the porch of my father's small home, sipping tea and watching the snow melt from the rooftops. She'd never been a morning person before, but now she rose early, helped Dad prepare breakfast, and listened to his quiet stories. He never spoke about business, about the empire that bore his name. He only talked about people. The baker who worked double shifts to pay for his daughter's college. The janitor who sang softly while cleaning office floors. One morning, as sunlight touched the rim of her cup, Layla asked him, "Mr. Jordan, do you ever miss that world? The boardrooms, the power, the wealth?" He smiled, stirring his tea slowly. "I never left it, dear. I just stopped letting it live inside me." She nodded, silent, her eyes distant, as if replaying every moment she'd once measured worth by appearances. That was the first morning I saw her truly change. Layla's parents came to visit a week later. They arrived unannounced, both visibly nervous. My father greeted them with his usual grace, offering them tea as if nothing had ever happened. Her mother hesitated before speaking. "Mr. Jordan," she began softly, "we owe you an apology for everything." He waved his hand gently. "No, you owe me nothing. We all live within the walls built by our fears. The trick is to recognize them before they become our home." Her father lowered his gaze. "Still, we were wrong about Jackson. About you. I don't know how to undo that." "You just did," my father said, smiling. They stayed for hours that day, not as rich in-laws, not as social figures, just as people rediscovering humility. For the first time, I saw Layla's father laugh, not the stiff, controlled laugh of business dinners, but a real one. When they left, my father watched them go with a faint smile. "Pride bends easily when touched by kindness," he said, "but never by force." Over the next few months, life settled into a rhythm, quiet, humble, and peaceful. Layla found work at a small local charity. She wanted to do something real, she said. not just sign checks, but help people directly. She spent her days organizing food drives and teaching underprivileged children to read. Sometimes, when I visited her there, I saw her kneeling beside a child, her expensive coat forgotten, her laughter echoing softly in the hall. She wasn't the same woman who once flinched at chipped furniture or wrinkled suits. She had found something deeper, the quiet satisfaction of simplicity. My father would watch her sometimes from the porch, smiling. "She's learning fast," he'd say. I'd smile back. "She's learning from the best." One evening, as the sun melted into a pale pink horizon, Dad called me into his study. The small room smelled of old books and cedarwood. On the desk lay a thin folder with my name on it. He looked up from his chair, eyes calm but serious. "Jackson," he said, "I've made arrangements for something. My shares, the remaining assets, they'll all come to you eventually. But I want you to promise me something." "Anything," I said. He leaned forward. "Don't use it to prove anyone wrong. Use it to make something right." I felt my throat tighten. "Dad, I don't need your money." He smiled faintly. "That's exactly why I trust you with it." For a moment, we sat in silence, two men linked by blood and love. One who built an empire, and one who learned how to live without one. Months passed. Winter turned to spring, and with it, life began to bloom again. Layla and I bought a small house, not far from Dad's. It wasn't luxurious, but it felt ours. Every brick, every creak in the floor spoke of effort, not inheritance. We'd visit Dad every Sunday. He always insisted on cooking, saying, "Food tastes better when it's made by hands that know struggle." Sometimes, Layla would join him in the kitchen. Watching them cook together, her laughing as he teased her about adding too much salt, felt like peace in its purest form. He'd tell her stories too, not of business, but of life. About the people he met, the lessons money couldn't buy, the times he lost everything and found himself again. Once she asked him, "Mr. Jordan, why did you hide your identity from the world?" He looked at her for a long time before answering, because truth doesn't need to announce itself. It reveals itself when people are ready to see it. She nodded slowly. "I think I was blind for a long time." He chuckled softly. "Most of us are, until love teaches us to look again." As months turned to a year, something remarkable happened. Layla's father invited my father to a private business meeting, not for investment, but for guidance. They sat together for hours, talking not about profits or mergers, but about people, about ethics, fairness, and what success really means. When Layla's father left, I saw tears in his eyes. "Your father is extraordinary," he said to me quietly. He made me realize that, in chasing everything, I almost lost what truly matters. I smiled. He has that effect on people. One evening, as the air grew heavy with the scent of rain, Layla and I visited my father. He was sitting on the porch, the soft patter of drizzle echoing around him. He handed us a small box wrapped in brown paper. "Open it when you're alone," he said. Later that night, we unwrapped it. Inside was a letter written in his familiar, steady handwriting. "My dearest Jackson and Layla, if you're reading this, it means I've gone ahead to a quieter place. Don't mourn me. I lived exactly as I wished, surrounded by peace, purpose, and both of you. Remember, power held quietly is stronger than power displayed loudly. Love tested by truth is love worth keeping. And wealth, true wealth, is the ability to sleep each night with a clean heart. Be kind, be humble. And whenever you pour tea for someone, pour it with both hands. It reminds you that giving always requires balance. Love, always Dad." Tears blurred the ink as I read the words aloud. Layla leaned against me, silent. We didn't speak for a long time after that. We just sat there, letting the silence say what words couldn't. Years later, when I visited his grave, I brought him a cup of tea, just the way he liked it. The air was cold, the grass still damp with morning dew. I whispered, "You were right, Dad.